Welcome back to our discussion with Mike. If you're joining us, please do check out the other video where we discussed how to professionalize a family business. And very excited to be having Mike on board because he's a subject matter expert when it comes to leadership, management, and even consulting. And in this video, we are going to discuss how can you read through influence and not power, not position. And before I go to Mike, I want to read your entry. This is an article you did April 12th, 2018, where you are addressing the issue of reading through influence. And here you go. My first leadership experience came when I arrived in Kenya in 1977 to be the GM of a local subsidiary of a multinational IT company. Both the Kenyans who reported to me and the Brits to whom I reported expected me to be the proverbial big man, perceived as all-knowing, all-wise, and all-powerful. And when I refused to buy into such an impossible scenario, when I took time consulting with and developing the newly promoted management team around me, I was branded by my bosses as weak and indecisive. So these are the ones who, in the UK, back in the UK.
Well, and also I had my regional manager here,
yes,
who accused me of reading too much.
Interesting. So you end the paragraph, it was something I learned to live with, knowing that my style meant that the staff felt more respected, more empowered, more motivated, and hence more productive. So for you, it was working. So let's look at this issue of reading through influence and not power. And I want us to start with a question I asked you before the shoot, where I asked you, to what extent does our personality, who we are, influence our leadership style?
Well, of course it does. And in particular, and not least, the first few years of our life. How did our parents behave with us? Were they stern parent, naughty child? Did they spoil us? Did they ignore us? Or did they nurture us? Did they build our competence and alongside it, our confidence? We start off at a very young age of being creative, but we know that so many people, the majority, this creativity is beaten out of them the more they go through education and their upbringing. Never mind rote learning and exams and stuff of 844 and so forth. So this formative years then become us as adults, with all the pluses and all the minuses. But when you say it's our personality, yes, for some, they're stuck. Nothing you can do about it. And neither you nor I will be allowed in to even talk about, what if you did more of this and less of that for these benefits? One of my articles in this collection that I've put together here is about Donald Trump. He's stuck. Can you imagine someone trying to coach Donald Trump to adapt his personality? Of course not. And what we know is that those who most need adapting with their personality, which is reflected in their behavior, which is reflected in how people react to them, those who most need that help are the least helpable. Often because they think they're fine.
And to some extent, they're able to get results still.
Yes,
despite,
yes. He became president, right?
Yeah. People look at him as a successful businessman.
Yeah.
He was able to rise to the highest political seat.
Yes.
So why wouldn't I read
and then also,
then?
to have to spend money on Mike and his fees, forget it.
Yeah.
But I want to come back to this thing of personality because it assumes that that's it. However, if you engage with a coach. The purpose, and I don't want to call it, it's not to change your personality, but it's to help you change your behavior, which sometimes requires you to separate how you feel from how you behave.
How you feel from how you behave.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's emotional intelligence. Because emotional intelligence, and it's at the center of my work, is about how you negotiate to win-win. Now, if your personality is like Trump, your aspiration, your expectation is to negotiate to win-lose. You want to see the other guy get a raw deal.
It's a zero-sum game.
Get an unfair, well, zero-sum, but you're the winner and he's the loser.
Yeah.
And whether financially or political power, whatever. Whereas the consequence of that, for the one who's lost, is that he'll either fade out and not want to deal with you again, which is what happened with Trump when he was in real estate. No one wanted to deal with him more than once. Or you want revenge. You screwed me, now I'm going to screw you.
You've stepped on so many people's
So
feet,
you go for win-lose,
yeah.
and you get it short term, but the longer term is lose-lose, because they've disappeared or they've got revenge, and it's the opposite of sustainable.
Yeah. How come it's so prevalent that whether it's the people we are reading, or even the society at
Or the
large,
customers, the
or even the
suppliers.
customers, there's this perception that you have of a reader that's, and you do write about it, all-knowing, all-wise, all-powerful.
Yes.
Where did this start? And why do people, majority of people, expect you to behave in that way?
Because
Such that if you now behave to the contrary,
because you have behaved in a way that leads them to know that if they are to survive in your organization, that's how they must treat you.
Please expound.
Yeah. If I am Trump and you work for me, you'd better tell me what I want to hear, or you're fired.
There's that, but how come society and everyone else? It seems like they expect a reader to be all-knowing, all-powerful, all-wise, to know all the answers, to call the shots.
I didn't expect it of me in 1977. So there is the spectrum. There was the spectrum then. Presumably there was the spectrum in ancient Egypt, and there is the spectrum today, and there will be the spectrum in 2050. The question is, what works best? Long term. And long term, like for instance, as I mentioned last time at a Davis and Shurtleff, where you recruit high quality people, including in terms of their values being compatible with Davis and Shurtleff values, which are integrity, quality, and continuous improvement and searching for higher things, for higher levels. Three values. So if we figure that's who you are too, come. Then we develop you, and then you want to stay, and you are engaged, and you love being here, and helping people around Africa lead better lives because they now have clean water and green energy. Hey, that's good, huh? Now, when you have that, and you have this, it allows for the flatter pyramid, I don't need to be feared. I don't need you to only tell me what I want to hear. If you are that kind of a sycophant, this isn't the place for you. Go to one of these other organizations where they need that because of their own insecurities and lack of trust in humans. All humans are untrustworthy. That's what we heard from poor Professor Magoha, who just died. He didn't trust anyone. He told us that. Yeah? That's why he's the bully and inspects and goes to every school. Yeah?
Wow, interesting. So it all emanates from trust.
Trust is at the center of
It's
everything.
at the center of everything.
There's this wonderful book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And there's a pyramid. And at the bottom of the pyramid, the biggest chunk about the biggest dysfunction is trust.
So here there's Paminus, he's a manager, he's been reading through power. And he wants to change his style to one of reading through influence.
He really does.
Yes. How does it look like reading through influence? And I know you mentioned some of the aspect, but if you could just get into the details.
There are many of these personality profiling assessments. And one of them, for instance, has you take a number of questions in a survey that lead to feedback to you that tell you the extent to which you are a dominant leader or one who leads through influence. And there are other words that help describe the components of someone who's more the influencer than the instruction command giver, the telling rather than asking. And these words here of the influencer, and I'm very much there, are that you're a convener, you're an integrator, you're an aligner, you're a facilitator.
So if I'm getting you right...
That's why people ask me to facilitate workshops for strategy development, for culture strengthening, whatever. It is why people ask me to be the chairman of boards, not just a director.
Chairman, to read the board.
I wasn't asked to be the chairman of this insurance company because I'm an expert in insurance. I know as much about insurance as you do when I joined. Obviously, I've learned a lot. And the other aspect of the non-technical, the non-expert leader is that they know how to grasp the essence of issues. I learned this with all my years in IT. I wasn't a techie. I didn't study computer science and all that stuff. But I was able to communicate in normal language to other non-techies, including at the highest levels, what it was all about, and the so what of the technical stuff, the business case. And the business case of investing your time as the power person, usually a man, I guess, but there are women too, right? Particularly in politics, of course. To invest time in softening yourself towards being more the influencer, there is a business case. Because it allows people the relaxation, the freedom to be creative, to express themselves, to feel good about making that bigger contribution. But because you've been doing this for decades, and since you were a young boy or girl, it requires a lot of work. But what you must see it as is unwanted baggage. And not to see that, well, this is who I am, nothing I can do about it. Find the strength. Do you have the strength to separate how you feel and that natural, instinctual behavior that you've been practicing all these years and that has worked for you? But in this day and age, never mind with millennials, Gen Z and so forth, if you want to get the best out of your people, how do you behave in a way to get the best out of them? To have them want to be part of you in a trustworthy way so that you can trust them. Now, the interesting thing is that, like someone like, I was telling Professor Magoha, however trustworthy you may actually be, he still won't trust you because he thinks no one is trustworthy. It's very frustrating. It's very disrespectful.
So what would you advise someone coming from, such a level where, as long as my first impression of you or my default setting is mistrust?
Default setting,
Yeah. What would be your advice?
Well, to discuss...
Because for him, well-read...
To discuss a coach with a coach.
With a coach.
Which, like with someone like George Marcoa, I don't know that would have been possible. He said, oh yeah, that's a good idea, come, coach me. I don't think so.
Okay.
Never mind at his age and so forth. But the question is for a coach to say, now, why did you develop this approach that you imagine that humans are not trustworthy? Tell me about how it was with you and your father, with you and your mother, with you and your siblings, your years at school, at university, your first job, your first boss. And then as you go through this formative history, that person will
You're
reflect
looking for patterns, you're looking for someone to reflect.
How it developed, leading to together now seeking clues as to how to begin to stop doing this, to start doing that, to experiment. To experiment with new behavior in defiance of your default position, to use your word, and by separating your feelings from this new scripts that can more readily lead to these win-win outcomes, rather than you having the decision making and them merely being the implementers, of tasks.
Interesting. I've also observed that it's very easy to read through influence during calm times. What about when there's a turbulence? And
well, when there's a crisis and when there are deadlines, it's not suitable.
Okay.
The question is, at what level? Let's look at the military, the obvious example, and wartime, Ukraine, whatever. I'm reading right now this very interesting book by Simon Sinek called Leaders Eat Last. And in it he writes about how in contemporary military leadership with the Marines in America, I know very much in Israel and elsewhere, this urgency decision-making in the heat of war, unless it's delegated right down to the lowest level for urgent decision-making, it's not going to work. And that's why it doesn't work for the Russians in Ukraine, because they're centralized up at Putin at the end of his long table. And you see my photograph of him there at the end of his long table with a big power gap and his steep pyramid.
Okay, interesting. So first is trust. No, first is to be self-aware. Second is work with a coach, because it's going to take you time. Okay, something you want to add on how to read through influence and not power? Is there something you feel that we've left out?
Well, you know, there are different times of your life, and if you look at my time of my life now, in my third age, this is no longer certainly the time where I'd be CEO of anything or wish to be, or anyone would wish to be. Unless maybe I'm a politician and I want to stand for yet another term for president. Ryla's 2 months older than me.
We'll vote for you in 2027.
So for me, my joy is influencing others, as a director, as a consultant, as a writer. It's to nurture other people. You're probably aware of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Where you start with the very basics of survival
needs,
and eating and stuff. And you climb up. And Maslow's peak was self-actualization. But after Maslow did his hierarchy of needs with that at the top, others said, but wait a minute, there's another one above self-actualization, which is actualizing others.
You move from self-actualization to actualizing others.
I'm self-actualizing by actualizing others. So it's not either or moving. It's complementing. It's mutually reinforcing. And as I defined my life purpose many years ago, I already, when I was CEO and when I had my first job here as a manager, all those decades ago, it was actualizing others, helping others to fulfill their potential.
Yeah. And where is the place of inspiring when it comes to influence? Or are they the same?
That's to do, well, to inspire, you have to be able, first of all, to be a role model. To, you know, to see how I behave and that I'm not just talking the talk. But the second one is my skills in communicating. How do I communicate for influence? We were talking before we started here about this Aga Khan University Graduate School of Media and Communication, where for a time I was an adjunct faculty member coaching leaders on their communication skills in order to be of greater influence. And this is at any level. We had a series of workshops for two of the very big banks for their branch managers on how they should communicate for influence with their staff, with their customers. And there's an article here that I did, the most difficult, challenging way of communicating for influence upwards in the organization. There you have to be really articulate, knowing that, as we've been talking about with some of these personalities, they don't want to hear from you. You just got on with your work. Don't give me these inconvenient thoughts.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for those insights. And allow me to conclude by reading one of the paragraphs in his article, where he says, we must lead by example and build win-win relationships with those around us. We must be coaches and enablers of those who we lead, appreciating that the more they grow and the more trustworthy they become, the more we free ourselves to focus on higher level strategic issues. Thank you very much for joining, and I will see you in the next discussion.